What's up, and welcome to the InnerVerse tribe. Welcome to the one within all. You guys out there getting a special treat of a live stream of one of these shows. We don't usually do that, but I felt like the energy would just be so good to bring it to you live and direct. And one of the things that's really good about this show, or at least we've received a lot of praise about, is our helpful etymological explorations and mythological syncretism that we do through the magic of words. Words have meaning. And it seems that a lot of the things that we say, when we go further into the details of the origins of those phonetics, we find that we're actually contradicting ourselves left and right, left against right, and every other which way you might imagine. So today we have got an awesome linguistic expert here today, an author of many books, including one called Word Up, her most recent, I'm pretty sure most recent. A guide, which is a guide to little language hacks for big change. Maybe not your most recent book, but she's also a coach who offers services to clients that lead them on a path toward transforming their life to find their ideal timeline, engineering word usage to promote health, and as she puts it, all around empowered badassery. And that is, of course, my guest for today, Dani Katz, who you can also find at danikatz.com, where you'll get the hub of all the things she's up to, including links to places like her Instagram and her locals page where her community convenes. And like every other show, we've got a first hour on the free platforms like YouTube and a second hour that will be exclusive to Rockfin Premium members or uploaded later to Patreon for everybody out there that supports me that way. Thank you. Thank you so much to everybody that does support. Also want to point out that if anybody wants to work with me for my tuning sessions using sound and vibration to help you balance your energetic field, the calendar for July is filling up. We're already probably almost 3 weeks booked out. So if that is something you've been thinking about or on the fence on, let's get in touch. Email me at chance@innerversepodcast.com because the month will fill up. And with all that being said, I'm ready to get into it. Let's break it down with the liminal linguist and lexiconal enlightener, Dani Katz. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Chance. Thank you so much for having me. That was such a stellar introduction. I'm honored.
I'm talking to a wordsmith. I got to do my best, right?
You rocked it. You knocked it out of the proverbial park.
Well, why don't you do your introduction of yourself? Because this is actually our first time really interacting other than on emails. And I've been getting to know you through your show Word Up, which is a lot of fun, many giggles and many profound ponders. But, you know, who are you and where did you come from and how did you get here today?
Oh my God. It's so very, very wide-reaching questions for the Aquarius. Where did I come from? I'm guessing a star system far, far, far away. But I was born.
That's how I describe Aquarius, is they aliens.
Yeah, I'm from the future, but I was born and raised in Los Angeles. And that's where I grew up, a very sort of magical, mystical place underneath the like overlay of, you know, of ridiculousness that is called Hollywood. And meandered my way to northern New Mexico, which is where I'm posted now.
Well, what got you interested in words? I guess that's a better specific question.
That's helpful. I was always a reader and a writer. As a little one, it was always my preference to be alone and reading. So I nerded out really hardcore on words. After college, I went to grad school for journalism. And I wrote for the LA Weekly for 9 years. And that, you know, that was like intense wordplay on the regular because we're working on short deadlines. And, you know, my whole career as a journalist, I think really helped me dive into a more multidimensional relationship with words because I was working with them so often. And then I had a near-death experience, shamanic initiation, around 2007. And through that experience, I found my way to a book called Hidden Language Codes by R. Neville Johnson. And I was reading that book while paralyzed on my couch for a little while. And in that book, R. Neville Johnson talks about being shot point blank in the chest 6 times and dying. And while he was dead, before they revived him, he was given these languaging codes. And after I read the book, when I went back to just work with words in terms of writing articles and writing stories and whatnot, they started to speak to me in these very layered, multidimensional ways. And I was like, wait, hold up. I'm on a deadline. Like, I don't have time to really engage these insane ontological conversations with you guys. And after a few years of tugging at me, I realized something bigger with a lot more novelty was inviting me to relate with it. So I delved into word witchery hardcore probably around 2009, 2010. And I've been playing with words in that sort of multidimensional way ever since, just, and working with them in terms of their energetic frequencies, how their coding is programming us as individuals, our collective, our reality construct at large, and then teaching people how to use language to transform our realities, to change our realities, to heal our bodies, to manifest, to expand, to awaken, all those wonderful things.
I love it. I think I've had a similar experience. I'm curious to get into more about like what it feels, the irony of, at least in my account, of having almost like a linguistic enlightenment, samadhi, temporary one day craziness that took over me, and all the words I could just all of a sudden feel what letters meant. I don't know how else to describe it. And ever since then, the codes have been continually revealing themselves to me. So
I love that. I'm not surprised, because I feel, we are a collective, and I feel like it's just that time where the language is inviting the same sort of upgrade and evolutionary quantum leap that we as humans are being invited to take, that, Gaia's being invited to take. So I think a lot of us are tapping into this meta construct and realizing, oh, our language is outdated and there are a lot of different ways to play with it. Similar as our relationship to time, right? That seems quite outdated as well.
Now, would you say that the language itself is outdated or outmoded, or it's really more the way we're using the language is the issue? Because a lot of times people will say like English is a slave language, and I'm over here like, this language has got seeds of all the others almost across the entire universe of spectrum of words. And if you were actually keen to what the phonetics were telling you, then English would be like the most powerful, magical, and amazing language ever. And we could add to it. Neologisms are fun, but how would you address that? When someone says English is a slave language, do you tend to agree, or do you think it's more about your own limited understanding and use of it that makes it a slavery operating system?
I think it's both. So I agree with you. I think English is whatever we make of it. I do think it's been tainted with enslavement frequencies and codes, which are very easy for us to unravel. Like, I wouldn't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater. I do think it's a beautiful language. The one piece that I've yet to really hone in on is if it was always tainted with enslavement codes, or if English was co-opted at some point along the way. Right now, my primary perspective on it, because this is the book that I'm finishing up now that I've been writing for the past 2 years, is where it's like our current iteration of English is loaded with a contrived sort of hierarchy. So we hear people who are speaking about equality and inclusivity, but they're speaking about it with a fundamentally hierarchical language. So no equality or empowerment is going to come from a language that is tainted with those frequencies. And it doesn't take creating a whole new language. It's just attuning ourselves to the frequencies, to the languaging habits that are enslaving us, and then switching it up, still within, the construct of the English language. So yeah, I don't think the entire language is an enslavement construct. I think it's being utilized by the powers that were to enslave us, but it just takes a tiny bit of tweaking for us to use it to liberate ourselves.
I see what you did there. You did it just now. The powers that were.
Exactly. Yeah, powers that were is one of my favorites, because, a big part of liberating ourselves with language is understanding how time really works. So a lot of us are under the mistaken impression that time is a linear construct. Probably not anyone who's watching your show, right? But that we don't have, the luxury of languaging things in the present moment until we've seen evidence in 3D reality, when in fact that's completely the opposite. We language reality the way we want to see it, and then density will catch up. So when I say the powers that were, I'm choosing to not ratify any of these beings' false power, and I'm choosing to instead put it in the past, which frees us up to create reality as we want to now, right? We don't have to wait for something to happen. I've decided that I'm no longer buying into their false power, and then the universe, conforms around that languaging, that claim.
Yeah, just that one tweak alone, I already see, like, I just installed the update, like that's going to be so helpful.
Mission accomplished.
So now I want more, like more examples of that, whether for our personal lives and empowering ourselves, or for altering the larger, wider consensus reality dream that we share, which is really one and the same thing, I guess. Both goals sort of accomplish each other.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the, really basic tenets of quantum languaging, which is the name of the body of work that I'm unpacking and teaching and sharing in my books and in my courses and all of that, is language the sucky stuff in the past, right? So, historically, I found myself tempted to eat sugar when it wasn't serving me. I used to have addictive tendencies around caffeine, right? Anything that we don't want to see more of, language it in the past, right? Which frees us up and signals to our subconscious mind and to the reality creation forces, we're available for a new, different experience now. We don't need to carry the same old experience into the future with us.
I like that. So to answer my question, instead of giving specific examples, you gave the framework of perspective that allows you to make those updates for yourself by just paying attention to how you speak.
Exactly. And paying attention to how we speak is really the primary piece, because the languaging upgrades are really so simple, right? I'm telling you, instead of the powers that be, the powers that were. That's a super simple concept to grasp. The gist is just being aware enough to hear ourselves and to hear our languaging habits, and then to be mindful enough to make the switch before going on that sort of unconscious automatic inclination to speak the way we used to speak. So it really takes a bit of mindfulness. And it's super fun, and it's great when we have support with our community. When the people with whom we spend the most time are attuned to these languaging upgrades, we can learn and master them really easily because we have extra ears on us, to call our attention to when we're sort of speaking in our old patterns, and then we can quickly make those shifts.
Yeah, I appreciate that about this community, the InnerVerse tribe. They are quick to point out things, not like in a critical way, but they're just always paying attention as much as I think any community could be. It's awesome. Nice. So one word I want to hone in on would be like quantum, because that gets thrown around. It's a very fuzzy word by nature. So when you're talking about quantum languaging, is there any elaboration you can give on why you choose that particular adjective?
Yes. And I definitely received some, I wouldn't say criticism, but friends in the branding world were nudging me to veer away from that. And I have Mercury in the 10th house in Capricorn, which makes me very exacting and precise, so a lot of, for a while it was the language of empowerment or the language of liberation. And quantum is really the just right word, because we're dealing with all the different layers and dimensions upon which language is working, down to, like the tiniest, most nuanced ways that language is programming us, to the sort of grander, more meta. And I do believe that this languaging paradigm, it is an evolutionary communication paradigm. So it's specifically meant, everyone gets benefit from it, but it's extra helpful for those of us who are walking the transformational path and choosing to consciously evolve ourselves. And I do believe that we are in, and I know I'm not alone in this, but we are evolving from a 3D to a 5D experience of reality. which means moving into the quantum and moving away from the linear and moving away from this sort of like static, and moving into more realms of like unknown and invisible and multiple layers, and being able to change, you know, the past by languaging something now, being able to change the future by going back into the past and kind of mixing it all around. So yeah, quantum languaging is what I'm calling it.
Okay, so that definitely resonates with the multidimensional idea, that rather than being stuck in one thing with quantum, you're referring to superpositioning in multiple states, not being enslaved by a state, which is right there in the external world as much as it is in the way that just certain languages like English, people tend to say, I am sad, I am unhappy, whatever. And in other languages, they might say, I have sadness, or I'm having sadness. And so it doesn't hold on to it or own it or identify with it. It just expresses it, which the expression of which is really helpful and important and healthy, including. So I guess I want to get your take on this, because you don't want people probably to, through their use of being more mindful of language and not policing what they say, but being considerate of what they say, you wouldn't want people to completely reject the shadow, right? Or lose all ability to express difficult emotions, because in my experience, the throat chakra is like this powerful vehicle through which any other chakra can release things that need to let go of through that. It's and if you don't if you don't wield it that way, you get quite a bottleneck, pun intended.
Yes, and a beautiful pun. You win the pun award for the moment. Yes, and I really like the example that you used in terms of quantum, and then I'll get to the next piece of it, is because, yes, when I say, you know, I am sad, I'm communicating my feeling state, and quantum languaging invites us to move beyond just, you know, what's the right word to describe my feeling state, to go into like, well, how is this particular syntax going to program my reality at the same time that I'm communicating to you or to whomever I'm speaking to what I'm feeling, right? So it's inviting us to kind of think of the multiple dimensions at the same time. And that's a really great example, because you see how much identification is really tripping us up as a culture right now, right? And how, you know, we have this I am languaging, you know, infusing how we talk about our sun spins, how we talk about our temporary feeling states, how we talk about like passing experience of imbalance or discomfort in the body, as in like I am arthritic, right? So all of these things are ways that we enslave ourselves. But yes, at the same time, we don't want a spiritual bypass. We don't want to cherry Mary sunshine and pretend that there aren't shadows at all. It's just, what is the most effective way for me to talk about my shadows that's still going to allow me to be sovereign in how I'm creating my reality, you know? So I'm a big fan of like taking the I or the I am out of my communications. Like in the Mayan language, they didn't have an I am verb. That just did not exist for them. Similarly, if you've ever seen Krishnamurti speak, if you've ever watched any of his lectures, so Krishnamurti was in the habit where he got away from the I am, and in a lot of his lectures, you could hear him still practicing state something with an I am, and then catch himself and then restate it mid-sentence, which had a really huge impact on me because I respect him so much. And it was just this beautiful permission of like, oh, he's allowing himself, you know, the process of learning in front of his students. And that was really beautiful for me as well. But no, of course we want to own our shadows, but not in a way that's going to enslave us to them, victimize us to them, have us languish or carry them into the future. So it's just, you know, like I'm noticing some sadness, not I am sad. I'm a big fan of verbing uncomfortable emotions, sensations, experience. So instead of like, I have anxiety, I'm noticing some anxiousing, right? Because when I add the ing, I'm giving it instructions to move, right? I'm putting it in motion. instead of inviting it to stick around, if I say I am anxious, right, then it's like I've just given it the key to my house and set it up in the guest room and been like, why don't you unpack and stay a while? Versus like noticing some anxiousing, then I'm holding it more at a distance. So that's a big part of what I teach, is how to not attach to our temporary experiences and to language them in motion, to language them lightly so that they can more freely move and shift, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Because when you started getting into like reducing the amount of I am languaging, immediately all kinds of like, yes, ding, ding, ding started happening for me. And I was like, okay, so how would I do that? And your verbing of it is great, because what came up for me, I was like, I came up with a solution in language, but it was kind of a mouthful. I was thinking like, instead of I am sad, to say something along the lines of, I invite my body to feel and release sadness. But that is so much to say. I mean, it's great. It's very specific and it would work. But I'm noticing some sadding.
Yeah, totally.
That works awesome.
And even like I'm moving through some saddening, some sadnessing, right? I'm clearing some sadnessing, I'm transmuting some sadnessing, right? Because we have this inclination, I am, I have, right? So I have is going to create a looser quantum entanglement than I am, but it's still going to create a quantum entanglement because we're taking possession. So there's going to be some sort of ownership. But when we use verbs, I'm transmuting, I'm dancing with, I'm clearing, I'm moving through some, I'm learning from, right? Again, these verbs that put things in motion, which makes it so that we don't have to stay in these shadowy spaces for any longer than is necessary to mine them for the lessons and integrate.
Oh, I think of all of that, I still think noticing takes the cake. And the reason is because you get into the green language of that word, and the very first thing that pops out is, I'm not icing such and such. So I'm not freezing up in it. I'm not sticking to it. Like, boom.
Ooh, I love that.
And you're in the observer state, which is quantum as hell.
Totally. And it's super detached, right? You're just in that witnessing. I'm noticing there's no attachment. There's no hook in that. It's very passive. I'm noticing some clouds.
You know what else I want to point out too is that the idea of reducing I am language, it has some like a bit of a sting to it at first, because you're thinking, or there's the feeling of, what about my individuality? What about my I am power? What about this and that? But really, in my experience, metaphysically, the I am is actually pretty equatable in terms of like a spiritual, I wouldn't say construct, but origin point of universe, and self, that it's related to, or maybe even is, the void, right? So you're letting it be what it is, which is pure undifferentiated potential, whenever you don't attach anything else to the I am, as little as possible, right? And that's that's the 0 point, back to quantum and the ideas of quantum. That's where your power is coming from. So if you leave your 0 point at 0, then you're always in this pivotal place, literally, where you can pivot in any direction, because you're on a wheel of this cosmic egg of 0 and void.
Exactly. I love that. And I really love the way that you phrase that with the 0 point. I mean, from my perspective, identification is enslavement. So anything that I am, saying I am, is me putting myself in a cage and limiting my experience, because anything I am necessarily infers all that I am not. So there's no wrong way. I'm a big proponent of free will. So however anyone wants to play the earth game, respect. We're all making it up for what's right for ourselves as individuals. For me personally, I think it's more fun to unidentify and to be in that void, to be in that 0 point, and to dance with the mystery and with the unknown. And there's just more freedom there. Anything that we're identified with is going to cause suffering, is going to cause constriction, is going to cause attachment. So yeah, I'm a proponent of letting go of all of the I ams. And when I'm in the process of manifesting or shifting something, you know, I am a money magnet. I am, you know, 10 days in the Maldives, you know, like whatever it is, that's a fun way to play, you know, and just keeping in mind that this is the Leela, this is the play, this is the game. How do we want to play it? You know, what's going to be the most fun, the most inspiring for our own individual earth walks.
I tell people all the time, if it ain't fun, you're not doing it right.
Totally. I mean, some people are addicted to sadness and misery, and like, that's cool, I guess.
There's a physiological biochemical addiction to those neurotransmitters that come up with those feelings. It's a real thing. Like, it's actually addictive, including fear. Fear itself is addictive. It's wild, but there's evidence of that in the biggest science.
Yeah, I mean, we can see that going on, you know, in terms of, you know, how the sham show is playing itself out, and how different humans are playing into it, and just seeing so many people enraged and angry all the time. And I only recently understood, like, oh, that is an addiction. Like, because part of me is, for the past few years, is like, is that fun to be offended all the time? Because it doesn't look like you're having all that much fun. You look angry all the time. But then I realized, oh, it's an addiction. Okay, got it.
Wonderful. This has been awesome so far. It's like, wow. What's popping into my mind repeatedly, though, is you made some statements about the astrologos and your particular sky clock. Oh my God, that's a bad Freudian slip. Sky clock configuration. Yeah. So awesome. And I'm wondering, so I've been kicking around an idea for a bit. I might have to unpack it for a second, but with this idea of astrology, the archetypes that are in the vault above, I've found that my relationship to inner archetypes is highly malleable, and that as I converse with them, not only are they influential on me, but I'm influential on the archetyping. I mean that in the sense of like that archetypes showing up in the outer world even changes when my relationship to it on the inside changes. That being said, I look at language across the world, history and mythologies and religious traditions, and I see a consistency to the story in all of them. And I talk about it all the time without going too far into, like, you know, that's a 20-year talk to just lay out all the consistencies. But the point being, there's like two scenarios: either an original civilization or cult or culture seeded all these areas of the world or influenced them in some way, or that astrologos is part of the makeup of this consensus reality, and people are finding it everywhere they are, no matter where they are, including through phonetical inspiration. And so the question becomes, with all that laid out, does our experience of how the zodiac reflects our life, I won't say influences it, I see it as pure reflection. You know, it's a two-way street. Is that something that you think would change if we just one day rewrote the story and scrubbed everyone's brains clean of the old sky clock story and did something different? Or do you think, because it's also encoding the story of nature and the seasons, that it's not really it's not really as made up as it might seem to somebody who looks at astrology with uninitiated eyes? That was a lot to throw at you.
It was great. That was a great question. Yeah, I want to take some psychedelics and like spend 10 hours unpacking that with you. I feel
we might come out the other side with entirely different constellations in the sky and be like, what did we do?
That would be awesome. So I have mixed feelings about it. You know, I've been an amateur student of astrology for, you know, many an eon. And I've taken great comfort in it because it allows me to unidentify and to not get all tripped up in my individuality and realizing, oh, like I'm a meat suit that's programmed by the archetypes coming through my cosmic blueprint. And I'm just playing out this unique configuration during this earth walk. And to be clear, like I don't know any of it. Like, I'm a monkey with a 3D mind, you know, and I don't think any of us really understands the entire scope of the game. And the more that I learn about it, the less I realize I know. So, but then there's like this story about the moon, right? And Steiner's perspective is that the moon is a satellite that used to be inside the earth, right? And then it like kind of, God sent it outside of the earth, and then it died, and it's like this dead thing out there, right? So then I always wonder, well, then how does that relate with our astrology? But then how many thousands of years have we been imposing these myths and stories upon the moon, which creates a collective agreement, which is really, I think, all our construct is really comprised of is agreement, you know? And I'm curious to know if that extends to things like gravity, to things like impermanence and mortality, you know? So I think that
on the mortality question, I mean, there's a reason I think that those 500-year-old Taoist wizards hang out in the mountains and avoid populated areas. Like they, you know, they don't want to be toxified by other people's belief that, hey, you can't do that.
Totally. Yeah. So I think that, I think it's probably both. You know, I respect astrology, and I respect, you know, those who came before and recorded their observations and passed them to us, and, you know, all that it helps me to, you know, grok and understand about my fellow humans and my earth walk and transits and whatnot. But at the same time, yeah, if we just changed our stories about it, would the whole thing change? Probably. I don't really know.
It's one of those like chicken or egg questions, because when we got there, would we still be just asking the same question, since we would ourselves be different? It's hard to say, but fun. Yeah, definitely high octane psychedelic speculation.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I said, would only the air signs be asking these questions?
I've got a moon in Libra myself, since we're talking about the moon.
Where's your sun?
I'm an Aries sun, Leo ascendant. That's why I got the hair. This is the main character hair. You know what I'm saying?
Totally. You definitely have major Leo character hair. I mean, I'm curious to know what your take on it is, because it's such a profound question. Do you think it's only our collective agreement that creates astrology, or do you think there's something of its own accord, you know, that's programming us?
I am going to go the route of it is both. It is not either or, not a binary, non-binary situation. One of the things that you said, or came up in one of your recent shows, the consciousness podcast you do that with the other guy, can't remember his name right now, but it was said, like, talking about non-dual philosophy and how funny it is that, or I thought it was funny that the very phrase non-dual creates binary in and of itself. I've always thought that when people come at me with like, dualism is illusion, and I'm just like, well, did you notice that you can't even talk about that without continuing to perpetuate dualism? I mean, it's something intrinsic about the makeup of this place that polarity exists, but you can go the hermetic route and look at things as not really opposites, but just one thing and its lack. And I find that to be really important, because if you take it all the way, then it disempowers the devil, because the devil becomes not another god, but actually just the lack of God. And thus becomes non-existent in, and then you've actually created your non-dual state when you go the hermetic rectification of the idea of opposites, polarities.
I'm not sure that duality isn't something that we can't evolve out of, and that we're not being invited to evolve out of. And even in terms of the phrase non-duality, like, full disclosure, I've historically had some paranoid conspiratorial tendencies in my thinking, but I wonder if that wasn't infected and co-opted from the get-go, you know, because that phrase itself, non-dual, is necessarily fragmenting. You know, it's the same as the word infinite. It's the same as the word limitless, unlimited, right? They're tainted with limitation and finite in their very articulation. And this goes back to, you know, the inquiry that I mentioned earlier, which is like, was English always like that? Or did nefarious forces come in and co-opt it. And that is, you know, I have some suspicions about the whole non-dual realm conversation. Who knows? But I really, there is a part of me that feels like we're being invited to evolve out of the illusion of duality.
I'm with you there. I guess what I would say about it is that duality is apparent, but philosophically non-existent. But then also the issue is that people mix up that idea of polarity and the Hermetic idea of polarity being just the thing and the lack of the thing rather than two things with gender. And gender is all kinds of a whole different thing, whole different question. But I think to answer that question, why I brought up the God devil example is I think that is the origin of it. When Vatican came along and did their whole mafia takeover long ago, however long ago, I think they lied to us about how long ago, not as long as they say.
Right.
But they refuse to acknowledge the Hermetic roots of their entire system by leaving this concept of God and devil entrenched as they're like adversarial to one another, and thus creating a second God out of what should have been like the original Trinity 3-in-1 God, and acknowledge the destroyer aspect as also the preserver aspect, because life comes from death and all that. Another way of undoing the apparent duality of life and death, because, you know, that's one of the most basic ones that people struggle with. And it's evident in nature that you have to have that part of the cycle for the life to continue.
Yeah, I'm very excited for humanity to outgrow our distorted relationship to death and decay. And like, not every death is actually a tragedy. Like, yes, it's sad to let things go and it's inevitable. I'm reading I'm on the 4th book in the Right Use of Will series now. Have you read those books?
No, I have not.
So they're channeled and allegedly channeled from G Daddy himself. And they're all about...
Is that Paul Selig?
Cian Rohan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Although I was just gifted 2 Paul Selig books. He's very up right now. But in this series, God is basically taking us through like the origins of creation and like his, and kind of, so in his perspective, there was God, the mother, the father of manifestation and heart. But we make it the Trinity to like X the mother out of it. And these books are about like the neuroses in the interpersonal relating between all of them, and how we, as above, so below, are living those and are now being tasked to clear them up, you know, for all of capital L life. And in that series, the devil or Lucifer is not God's polar opposite, it's God's denial. And it is just the representation of all those, you know, all the shadows, just like you asked me earlier, the shadows that we're not willing to look at, that we're not willing to take responsibility for, that we're not willing to move through because we're in denial. So from that perspective, again, it takes it away from that dualistic, like creator destroyer thing, which really has me wondering, like, what will this realm be like when we move through our denial? You know, does evil have to exist? I'm not really sure. Maybe it's something we can transcend.
Yeah, I always just look at that as the inversion of live. live is evil is live backwards, right?
Yeah.
They think too, once we rectify our relationship to death, which would also be the destroyer aspect of the Trinity, then we realize that that's the redeemer. Just like the sun kills all life at a certain point in the year, only to resurrect it all and preserve life. It's all part of the same cycle, and helpful to not be in denial that that part of the cycle exists and is necessary and healthy for our wholeness. And yeah, that Trinity thing exists everywhere. And in most places, they didn't cut out the mother and call it a ghost. So I'm down to have a better relationship with the mother myself. And luckily I do I think that that's been part of what has empowered me, was when I healed that relationship internally. Not that I always had a great mom externally, so maybe that helped. But I want to talk about, there's a lot of things I want to talk about. Let's actually make sure though that we give a good chunk of space here for our free audience for you to really talk about the benefits of your coaching services and maybe like a success story or something. I always like those since solutions are so helpful.
Yeah, solutions are really helpful. So I am a transformational coach. So I call it my 5D ear to sort of hone in on the gaps and the chasms between, what we're saying we want and how our lives are actually manifesting, or, where are we full of shit? Where are we kidding ourselves? And I've recently kind of expanded into the language of healing, where I've been working locally in New Mexico with people who've received cancer diagnoses as I was, beta testing this new program. So the two success stories that are coming to mind, one is I have a client who's in full remission, and we've been breaking down like where he was playing small and how that contributed to this healing opportunity that he manifested for himself. So after, we got his health in the clear, we've been moving him deeper into being brave and bold in his career, right? And really putting himself out there as a thought leader in ways that, he hadn't been doing before, so that he's fully expressed. So that's a really beautiful one. That's a client I'm working with now. Another one is a woman who, she had all these dreams about being like a financial trader and going really big with her business. And since, we did a 3-month package, since then, she's like trading like a badass, and she's having so much fun and really like riding the financial waves and like so confident and like amazing with her boundaries. I love working with people who want to be bolder, right? Who want to step into more expansive realms of their own potential, of their own embodiment, and helping them know their sovereignty, their boldness, their badassness, all of those things. So those are the two that come to mind.
Those are really good ones. I mean, they'll never tell you at the Death Factory, aka hospital, that your language has something to do with the way that your body heals, but they will mention, oh, that natural homeopathy cure that you just asked me about, that's all placebo effect, as if they've described it all what it is by giving it a name, and now we can shut the book on that particular question of what is it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that I do my best to not completely slag the Western medical paradigm, because the language of healing—
I just did. That was probably a little brutal.
I mean, it was spot on, that as I've been working with people who are really in the cancer industrial complex, I realize how toxic the languaging is. And I don't think that, healers or health practitioners are doing it on purpose. I think that for the most part, they're well-intended. But the problem with that system is that it's so litigious that it is always going to defer to saving its own ass over serving the patient's well-being. And those two are in conflict, because they need to tell everyone worst case scenarios so that they won't be sued. But what they're doing is they're cursing people, and they're saying this will happen, and this is the worst thing, and you can expect this. And it's all with this definitive languaging that is programming people who are in a very vulnerable state, right? And we have this weird thing in our hierarchical culture of putting doctors on pedestals, right? These are authority figures who know my body better than I do. And so it's very easy, to allow their words to have power over us. And every word that they say is programming our body. And then, the clients that I've been working with, they're looping on these fear and how bad is it and what's this bad thing, instead of seeing, whatever's expressing through the body as neutral communications, right? And it's just super simple. Like, what is the communication and what is the body inviting? And if we take the panic and the judgment and the fear about it, like, what is the corrective action we're being invited to take? And how can we program the body for swift, accelerated healing, while we're going through these initiations, which they are, they're initiations. For anyone who's walking a path that's, kind of witchy or mystical, we're called to go inside to learn ourselves, right? And oftentimes that's through like discomfort or an injury or dis-ease or whatnot. And the gist is to look at it from a place of neutrality, to frame these as initiations and to learn, how to language the experience in such a way that we're programming the body to heal as quickly and easily as possible.
In my experience, everything you just said is completely testable and verifiable, yet it is described by mainstream as being woo-woo, fluffy, impossible, placenta, another Freudian slip, placebo. Yeah.
If you want to laugh, do a DuckDuckGo search for Wikipedia and pseudoscience, and you will just see a list of like the greatest healing modalities, the coolest mystical shit, and it's all just marginalized as pseudoscience with like a flick of the wrist.
I remember the day that I realized that, oh, we're just playing opposite day. That's the game. It's opposite day. So whatever they told you is probably the opposite. And it makes sense because the whole paradigm of these fake authorities are based on the schisming and holding on to of a literal dualism that is completely conceptual, since all things being mental in the first place. And it, like I've mentioned in the intro, I do tunings for people with giant tuning fork and smaller tuning forks, right? And in that, it's really, really crucial and important to heal the divide between any part of yourself and any other part of yourself. In fact, the idea that I'm able to do those remotely demonstrates the conceptual nature of all forms of division, particularly distance, separation, all mental constructs, all Leela or Maya. And unfortunately, that particular Maya is the mother of monsters. Division is. It's not, it's not the type that at all promotes whenever we even say healing, like I've been doing my best to rephrase to wholeness.
I call it holing. Same. Holing.
There you go.
We're just taking, and it's the same, in terms of fragmentation, or as you say, schisming, it's another big part of my coaching work is like honing in on these fragments, right? And getting, finding them, illuminating them, and then supporting clients and going back and inviting them to come back. It's the same that shamans call soul retrieval. And, it's what I call holing. We're just collecting all these pieces so that they're not, freaking out and creating conflict and, contraction when we have clear goals and things that we want to do here. But it's hard when we have these fragmented parts that are running these outdated belief systems or that are, running these erroneous tracks and storylines. And the gist is finding them and bringing them back. And that's what I find so odd. This is kind of a non sequitur for our conversation, but in terms of like cancel culture and trying to make it like trying to outlaw being triggered. And it's like, well, if we're not triggered, then how are we going to find these pieces of ourselves to come back? If I trigger someone, I'm like, you're welcome. You're welcome for that.
Yeah, man. The obstacle is the way. Be grateful for the obstacles. They illuminate your path. And otherwise, you'd just be like, what do I do? Where do I go? I guess nothing. You talked about goals, and I've had, it took me a long time to finally get here and start it up, but over the past, like probably 6 months consistently, I've had an incredible success with simply writing down goals and certain goals, like regularly. Journaling is cool. And with my journal, in the margins every day, I'll write things like, thank you, Spirit Team, for bringing me new clients this week. And yes. I've noticed, and I'm tracking it in the journal itself, that the days when, or the weeks when I am consistently doing that, especially for weeks on end, my calendar is just filled up with people that were able to help each other in a really beautiful reciprocal way. And then when I lapse on doing that particular part of the journal, which is just one sentence, it takes 5 seconds, and I do it every day. But when I lapse on that, I notice that the clients begin to trickle and decline, not like go away. I won't use that language, but it's definitely empowering just to have a simple goal setting in language that you put onto paper. And anyway, can you talk about hacks to use language for goals and dreams and, maybe the importance of that and inspiration of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love that you have that practice and that you've honed in on how important it is to be consistent and what happens when you're not. That's beautiful. I love that. I think one of the biggest things that I see in my clients, and I also teach homeschoolers, I teach them how to use language to create reality, and I teach them about propaganda and critical thinking. And I think one thing that, you know, we're still developing as humans is the mastery of knowing what we want and being able to ask for it, right? So I'll teach people these tools, and sometimes like what takes the most work is helping people dream biggest and hone in on what they actually want. And I think that that's something that used to come easier to us, but because of whatever our indoctrination is, it's become trickier. So I'm a big fan of using present tense positive languaging in claiming whatever it is that we want. So as you're saying, you know, as I'm calling in 3 new clients this month, it's speaking about it as with definitive languaging, and it's already happening. I love my clients. I love, you know, how they show up for their assignments and how enthusiastic they are. And I really see these shifts happening so quickly, you know, and speaking about these things in the present tense, not putting them off in the future with I want, or maybe someday, or I hope, or, you know, to bring them here and to claim them with confidence, you know. So a lot of times I'm working with clients about what they want, and it'll be like, I don't know, like maybe it'd be cool to have a partner. And I'm like, okay, I want you to relanguage it again with confidence and with excitement about how much you love your relationship and how do you feel in this relationship, you know, and what is your partner reflecting back to you, and what are you creating together, and how are you spending your time, you know, to really get into the energy of what we want. And once it's already been achieved, well, then now what? You know, so another piece is to jump out ahead of it. Okay, you've already accomplished your goal. Now what? You know, jump 5 goals out from that. Now what are you creating? You know, and to really play with collapsing the perceived distance between future and now, and languaging these things accordingly.
That is beautiful. I'm thinking of one time a long time ago, I did an experiment that actually kind of turned me off to the idea that you could do this type of almost like linguistic programming manifestation. And I realize now that it was because of how I structured it and distanced myself from it being reality in terms of the way I was doing it. And so, you know, and what's cool is we'll continually always be finding more ways that, oh, I was limiting here. Oh, this was limiting there. And instead of beating yourself up for it, again, obstacles are the way. And just as soon as you notice it, also, I think it's helpful to recognize that there is always more beyond. There is always further to go. I don't have a better word for infinite, maybe endless. But
Omniscopic.
what's that?
Omniscopic.
Oh, there you go. Omniscopic.
Yeah.
So in that sense of a limitless omniscopic self, then embrace and have joy in the idea that you'll continue to improve and that you'll always find more and that you keep expanding and that's what life does. It keeps on going.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love that you brought that in, because I mean, I've been playing with this languaging paradigm for a while, and I'm still in the process of mastering, right? And so it's noticing a lot of times when we're calling something in is even just like how many words are we stacking in front of ourselves and what our dream is. And though, you know, however many words indicates our reticence, right? And a lot of times, you know, we might know the optimal languaging upgrade, right? But it doesn't feel emotionally resonant to say it, right? If I say, you know, I am with my soulmate living in my dream house, and saying that makes me feel like I want to cry, that's a breadcrumb, right? Like, that's great. That's showing me, okay, there's an erroneous belief system in there. There's a fragmented part of me that isn't willing to sign on to that. And this is showing me, okay, go do some integration work, you know? So it's also using the language not to barrel over things in some like the secret magical, you know, spiritual bypass way. It's also using the languaging upgrades to find the cracks and to find, oh, this, I still need to do a little bit of integration here. That's great for me to know. Let me go do some healing, do some acknowledgement, let me cry and scream and whatever, and then I'll come back to this and then collapse that distance. So yeah, it's a process. It's going to be a process because we chose to take incarnation in this dense reality. And, there's a lot of cleanup work that we're still doing.
Yeah, it's hilarious. How humans treat themselves like they're the top of a totem pole of sorts, but in another sense, this realm is the bottom floor of the ocean. I mean, we're underwater right now. There's limitless miles of ether above, and we can continually rise up, which I believe fully is our natural inclination when not retarded by external forces or internal sabotage, which end up being one and the same, because you do the internal and then it comes to you in the external. And that it's like our mutual friend Michael Wan put into my head, which is so beautiful and helpful. Ask yourself, is this situation the outside world leading my inner world, or am I leading the outer world through my inner world? And I was going to wear my Susquehanna alchemy shirt for this talk, but then I found that it had been utilized as a cat puke receptacle, which, that's great too. So go ahead.
I didn't realize those shirts were multifunctional.
Apparently so. Yeah, apparently so. It was very attractive to the kitty. Again?
I said your cat has great taste.
Oh, absolutely. I'd like also to turn people on in the last 5 minutes or so that we have in the free hour to your podcast work, the different shows that you're a part of, not just Word Up, but all of what you're doing online that serves as free and accessible content, or content that can be received for reciprocity to you. And, maybe something particularly exciting or events, anything that might be worth tuning people into before we wrap up free hour here.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So yes, I do. There's my podcast, Word Up with Dani Katz. And that features interviews with visionaries and original thinkers. And we're focused on solutions, best case scenarios, alternate timelines, what's wonderful and how can we make it more wonderful. I do a podcast with Emily Moyer, which is Deep Truth with two Valley girls. We've most recently been unpacking the Santa Fe Institute Lifeboat Foundation Consilience Project op. That's been super fun / creepy. I have oodles of free video content. I have a series called Words Are Matter, which features free quantum languaging hacks. I do planetary service announcements, which are more cultural criticism. I have a new show I've been doing called Spot the Propaganda, which is just, illuminating the propaganda in popular media. And just last week, I taught a webinar. Our friend Michael Wan was there. The Language of Healing. And it's a 2-hour webinar, which has been recorded and is now available for folks to buy and watch online. And that breaks down the precepts of the language of healing and how to program our bodies for optimal health, vitality, and vibrancy.
That is awesome. One of your recent shows that I really particularly enjoyed was Mike coming on 2 months in a row. That guy is so on the cutting edge of consciousness that there is no last week to him. He's like you could talk to him 1 hour later and it would be a whole different conversation. I mean, that's true for everybody, but he never runs out. He never runs out of steam. I love that.
That show was hilarious because the first show I did with Michael was 2 hours. We stopped recording and we talked for another 2 hours. And it was like, okay, we need to do the next show sooner than later. And even just yesterday, I texted him and I was like, I just noticed this thing and it seems super pressing. So I feel like as I'm, I just launched my podcast in April. It seems like there's going to be some people who are going to come on. I've interviewed Robert Phoenix twice and Guru Singh's coming back on. So I think I'm going to have like kind of a rotating home crew. And then, some other special guests. Antara Ali is dropping later this week. And yeah, it's been fun. I just love dropping in with people with really expansive, vibrant minds, and just tasting of their brilliance, and seeing, like you and I are doing, like, what is the alchemy of our energy, and what comes when we drop in together.
Well, if you ever want to get a guest spot filled, I like to talk. Okay, any closing thoughts and words of wisdom, loose threads to tie up for our free listeners before we move over to the Rockfin side? I'm going to drop a link, everybody, to that, and we'll have a musical interlude with a countdown timer, so you'll have plenty of opportunity to hop over to the stream there, or join me on Patreon and catch the replay, which I will get posted as soon as possible.
Cool. The message that I tend to share on podcasts is just for people to know that, like, we're making it all up. And so for everyone listening, like, you have the right to author your story however you want to, as kind, as fun, as compassionate, as abundant, as healthy as you want to. And it really is as simple as, how are we languaging these things? And so, tune into my videos, see how it all resonates. I'd love to work with you. I'd love to support you in being your most empowered, realized, badass, awesome self.
I love all of that. I think there's no mistake that the ancients conceptualized the source as logos. Definitely not a mistake with that. Or that in the scale of musical notes, the throat chakra through which we speak is the G, generative principle, the 7, like all of that. It's in every aspect of the multidimensional reality of infinite correspondence, omniscopic correspondence. I like it. So that is a 50-cent word, as Mike says.
Yeah, you get the quantum languaging brownie badge for the day.
Sweet. All right, I'm going to hit the music. I hope a lot of you guys hop over to the Rockfin side. YouTube's no fun compared to the free speech that we are always able to do, but more encouraged to do on places like Rockfin. So I'll see you all there. And thank you, Dani. This has been a fun first hour. Can't wait to go deeper.
Thanks, Chance.